Yes, Activision buying WB. Okay.
Correct.
So, if you guys have been under a rock, you might not have heard. There's potentially a $4 billion sale going through with AT&T selling the Warner Brothers game division to potential buyers that are interested. And now these buyers that are interested is what's very concerning about this, because the people that are interested are Activision Blizzard, EA, and Activision, three of the most bloodthirsty and competitive publishers in the entire industry. There are a
Like
lot of jobs at stake.
microtransactions are their love child. Like the three
Yes,
of them
and
together.
yes, and there are on top of, like, I know a lot of our audience might be concerned about the game is getting impacted. The real thing that might get impacted is the potential of hundreds of jobs getting lost. So I want to know what you guys think about this whole acquisition deal.
I'll go first. I really think that people are overreacting to it as far as from the consumer perspective. And from the perspective of the people working on the games, you're not overreacting. That's a serious concern. And anytime there's a merger acquisition like this, that's going to probably result in people losing their jobs, which is awful. But let's step out of that angle of it and look at the other angle from the consumer angle, which is the way most people are looking at this, is they're thinking about themselves and how this impacts them and their entertainment of choice. And what I genuinely think is that neither of these games are going to be canceled. And this might end up working out for the better for DC fans. You've got to think, in the last 5 years, how many DC games have we gotten? That's not a rhetorical question. We've gotten one. Yeah. Injustice 2. The last W Against Montreal game was in 2013.
Batman Telltale, technically.
Yeah, I guess Batman Telltale. So
I don't consider it AAA, though.
Right. Does it seem to you like Warner Brothers is utilizing the tools that they have in their tool belt to the best capacity? Of course they're not. And with that being said, they're squandering a lot of opportunities. And thinking at EA and Activision, you've got to consider Warner Brothers was embroiled in a huge controversy in 2014 when they tried to sell the season pass for Arkham Knight without announcing a single thing that was in it. They announced the $40 season pass. They didn't announce anything that was in it. And then they started advertising story DLC gameplay, most of which was 10 minutes long. I say this because I think, yes, Activision and EA, we love dunking on them both. They are bloodthirsty and they're leeches. But my broader point is that so is Warner Brothers. Have you seen the microtransaction system in Injustice 2? Oh, my Lord. And have you seen, as I said, the Arkham Knight Season Pass, which was a borderline scam, not even exaggerating? $40 for 10-minute story missions? I mean, get out of here, bro. So my point in saying that is this. All of these publishers, I am not genuinely convinced. I do not think that EA releasing a Batman game would be any more microtransaction, money-sucking than a WB game. I really don't. I don't see any evidence of that. I know what WB did in Arkham Knight, and like I know what they're capable of with Injustice as well. And all these microtransaction systems, that's just the trend of the industry. All of these companies utilize those tactics. The question is, which publisher is going to really empower Rocksteady and WB Games to make the best game that they can make and let them cut them loose and let them see their vision? Because there are reports that Rocksteady was not able to make the Superman game that they wanted to make because WB kiboshed it. I don't know if that's 100% true, but that's what reports, and it sounds accurate to me. And imagine if they go to a publisher that lets them make the games that they want to make. Okay, I'm done rambling. Your turn.
Yeah, so I agree a lot with that. What I mentioned in my video is that I think that my main concern is definitely the developers. It's very scary, especially for them, because a lot of them are probably looking at their job security, having no idea what direction they're going to go. However, from the consumer perspective, I also agree, like, Warner Brothers hasn't been the best. But I think that there's something to be said about the concern that, like, you can see what Activision did with the Spider-Man franchise when they held that IP. You can look at, like, the trend where a lot of them are trying to go for more battle royale style games than the traditional Arkham games. And if they were not smart, which a lot of them I don't think are very smart in terms of wanting to please the fans, and they just really want to do whatever's going to sell the best, then I think that there's a very real concern there that they'll restructure like Rocksteady and Warner Brothers Games Montreal to just fit that mold rather than the one that will appeal to the developers, the one that they want to make the most, and the one that the fans want to see the most in exchange for games that are really like cheap and easy to produce, but turn around a decent profit rather than, giving a good sized team a lot of money to do a Superman game. Instead, they'll just give them like the bare bones to do it. So I think that it's we'll probably definitely get more quantity, but it's definitely in question if we'll see that same quality that we've gotten in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Well said. Dustin, what do you think?
I think and I also forgot to add, another potential buyer would be Take-Two, who is responsible for 2K games, Rockstar games, which all have their own very predatory systems in terms of microtransactions. Now, my counterpoint...
Rockstar does too?
Yeah, with the shark cards and the gold bars and Red Dead Redemption Online. They, I mean, you can see with them... We're going to touch on this in a little bit, but they announced Grand Theft Auto 5 for the third generation in a row. So they are very much milking that game and the microtransactions that game pulls in. But my counterpoint to your point, Kobe, is while, yes, WB does do microtransactions, they are not, I feel, as predatory as, say, Activision is or EA is in terms of microtransactions. Even 2 years ago, EA had that whole scandal with Battlefront, where they were selling full-on characters for like $20 a piece. And they actually had to completely restructure that game. They had Anthem come out not that long ago, which total failure. You can find that game for $5, and it came out last year. And for me, I feel like microtransactions, they're not good, but they're a necessary evil for a lot of these companies. Like, Mortal Kombat 11 has microtransactions, but they're not necessarily bad. Meanwhile, you go over to Battlefield 5, and I mean, you can buy booster packs for that game that actually give you an advantage versus, grinding 8 hours to get all the perks and equipment that you can get through gameplay. So if one of these companies did buy, WB Montreal, Rocksteady, NetherRealm, all the WB studios, my main fear is that they would orient them more so in a way to where they would not be able to make the same single-player experience that they've been doing, because most of these companies, at the end of the day, are online companies. They prefer to do the games as a service market, and WB has no games like that currently besides, Mortal Kombat 11, and that's a niche game. It's a fighting game. So there's really tons of ways for that to go, but I feel as though whoever buys these companies, the companies are going to be way worse off for it. WB, I feel, learned their lesson through Shadow of War.
Yeah.
And they have definitely changed a little bit after that.
Especially Can you briefly recap what happened with Shadow of War in WB? There was a big controversy around the microtransactions, is that right?
Yeah, so their microtransactions were basically like you could grind 10 hours to get the necessary power level to storm this base in game, or you could buy like $10 of silver chest or whatever, and it would give you just better gear. And it's a single player game. But the game had the game had the multiplayer component where like you could have your own fort or whatever. I never played it. I don't like those games. But I also remember there being a thing where one of the developers passed away during the game getting made. I don't know if any of you guys remember this happening.
Yeah, no, I do remember this.
This developer passed away, so they put him in the game as like an orc, I think.
Uh-huh.
And they were just like, yeah, for the first 6 months after release, all the profits are going to his family. For the first 6 months only of the game being out.
Yeah.
After that, they're going to pocket all the rest of the money. And I feel like after they got called out for that greediness, they chill out on microtransactions. Because, like, Mortal Kombat 11, there really aren't much. Hitman 2, that was a game that was published under them. There wasn't much. I don't think there were microtransactions in that at all, besides, like, the new levels coming out. And I don't even think that game was episodic. So, it's a difference.
Yeah, and along with that too, because I agree with all of that with the microtransactions, but even beyond that, like Activision and EA aren't interested in buying Warner Brothers games because they're like really passionate about Batman or DC or Lord of the Rings. They're doing it because they know if they put Batman on a game cover, it's gonna up their sales. And so really, like I agree, I could see it being like transition to multiplayer stuff. Like we'll get a Battlefield clone that's like marketed as an Arkham online game.
Gotham City
That
Imposters.
Yep, that has tons of microtransactions. Like I don't think that's outside of the realm of possibility if, say EA purchased the game or the Warner Brothers games.
Yeah, and also EA is notorious amongst developers because they like to buy studios and then shutter them after only a couple
Yep.
years of being acquired. And that
Really?
could very well happen. Yeah, they've done it numerous times. I mean, I can find an article right now. Give me 1 second. You guys can.
Why do they do that? Is it because of financial issues, or is it because they're just like, oh fuck you? Like, what's behind that?
So what's behind that is if they feel like if a company even so much as shows a little bit of inadequacy in terms of getting a product out in time or making a successful product, they are only given a couple chances before getting completely shuttered. A good example of this is the people that made Dead Space. Visceral Games, they were making a Star Wars game, and the Star Wars game was taking a little bit longer than EA wanted. They shut down the entire studio because of that. Or the new Need for Speed games, they were made by a crew called Ghost Games. What happened there was they made 4 Need for Speed games. None of them really did well. The last one actually was the best one out of the 4. But EA saw the sales and was like, yeah, you guys are done. So they made them a satellite studio, got rid of 90% of their staff, and basically pushed them into a new studio. And totally killing that studio, shuttering hundreds of jobs. I mean, EA's known for killing studios. I just found an entire, story based on it. They shut down Westwood Studios, Origin Systems, let me see, Playfish, whoever that is,
So
It's just-
basically, what you're saying is, if W Montreal was owned by EA in the last 7 years, they wouldn't exist today.
they would
100%. They'd be done.
Correct.
They would
Okay.
not existed 5 years ago. They would not be around.
Yeah, they would basically by 2015, when they didn't have a game ready, they would have been kiboshed.
Yep.
Probably, it sounds like.
Definitely.
Yeah. It's tricky because like best case scenario, they'd take in like Rocksteady, Warner Brothers Games Montreal, and be like, okay, you guys can do your thing. We trust you on doing it. But more likely, they do one of two things. One, they just absolve the studios, or two, they would like say, great, Rocksteady, we're gonna send you guys, or we're gonna have you guys join up with this other studio, or expand your studio by like 200 devs so that you can make bigger games that are microtransaction heavy. So even if like Rocksteady gets to stay intact, there's a good chance that Rocksteady will lose a lot of that creative control, and it will be very much a corporate thing. Like, you need this specific style of game pushed out at this date, and we're running your studio for you, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very, very interesting. I didn't know that full history about EA. That's definitely very concerning.
Yeah.
But I'm curious to know. I don't know if either of you have seen my videos on the topic.
I have.
Have you guys heard what K-Wing has had to say about this?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm curious to know, and it won't hurt my feelings if you take his side more than me. I mean, my perception of this is much calmer than his. And I'm curious to know who you guys agree with more, because my thinking is, well, this could actually end up working out for the better. And I'm acknowledging that it could be a disaster, but I'm also thinking that maybe it could work out. And you do make very good points about EA and Activision. You do make very good points, but I'm curious to know what you think about, K-Wing, versus my perspective on it, and knowing full well, me acknowledging that K-Wing knows a lot more about the video game industry than I. So what do you guys think?
So having seen both, I don't know that I'd side with like one in particular. Like, I think K-Wing's looking at it from a worst case scenario perspective, and you're looking at it from a best case scenario perspective. I don't think it'll be quite as bad as K-Wing thinks it'll be. I don't necessarily think it will go without a hitch. Like I don't know that it, like for a few years we might not think, or I don't know, like we might get a few Batman games and not really notice much of a difference. But again, like I see how Activision turned Spider-Man into just like this corporate, like, we're shelling out a game every year. We don't care what the quality of it is. So I think that more likely than not, it's something that in the short term we probably won't notice too much of a difference of, but in the long term, like time will tell if these developers get to keep their jobs, if EA, Activision, Take-Two, whoever buys them, treats them well, respects them, lets them make the game they want to make, or if they start turning it into like just like a corporate carbon copy, like Ubisoft does with a lot of their games.